Okay, we are recording here live. And we'll bring the full over here to you.
Okay. What was the best decision? Good luck getting it back.
All right, we're good to go.
I'm good to go? Okay.
Yeah, so jump in.
Thanks for agreeing to meet with us one more time as we sort of finalize our tuition rate proposal. So I know the suspense is killing everyone, but what we are going to request to the Kansas Board of Regents is a 2.8% tuition rate increase. That's across the board, all pricing cohorts. So Manhattan campus, resident, non-resident, online, on premise, Olathe, all of that is the 2.8% increase. So what I kind of wanted to do today is just kind of walk you through. Gosh, it's why you don't you run the mouse. Wanted to walk through sort of our budget planning document. And this is a document that we walk through with the deans and vice presidents, really outline sort of our both our revenue assumptions for the year and our expenditure assumptions for the year as well, so that we can kind of get a sense of sort of what's all baked into this. If you recall, what we talked about last time is we look at this as a whole package of activities that we're doing. So what is enrollment growth? What is the tuition rate increase revenue coming in? What is new funding from the state? What are the internal reallocation or budget cuts that we need to do to realign our resources to put back into our investments that we have for this next year as an institution. So this is pretty detailed. Let me walk through it. Please, if you have questions, stop me and ask the questions, and then we can kind of just have that conversation from there. Does that sound like a fair plan? Okay. So the way we have this organized, at the top is revenues, the bottom half is expenditures. So let's start on the revenues. You see we have the item, and then on the right is the column in terms of what that net revenue, net item represents. So just some of the basic core assumptions that we've built into here: 2.8% rate increase. We would get funding from the state for a pay plan at 2.5%. I'll get into some nuances there. We would, as an institution, do a 2% across the board salary increase for our faculty and staff. And then, as noted in there, there are some college and administration areas that are going to be, their budgets would be cut and realigned into sort of our funding priorities for the year. So you see there, line R1, revenue 1, that 2.8% tuition rate increase would generate approximately $5 million in new revenue for the institution. We are anticipating, and we discussed this last time from an enrollment growth perspective, we're projecting to be up about 300 heads this next year. A lot of that is driven by growth in our returning students. As we mentioned last time, we are seeing increased applications and admissions and new student orientation enrollments and housing deposits for our incoming freshman class. And so we're seeing very positive signs. However, we also have the FAFSA complication that's hanging out there that we are honestly wanting to be very conservative and understand that because that information is getting out so late, those aid packages are getting out so late, we really believe it might impact the decisions of a lot of our freshmen or potential incoming freshman students. So overall, between conservative growth estimate in our freshman headcount and then our returning headcount, projected to be about 300. I will say that would be the second year in a row that we would have seen some enrollment growth on the Manhattan campus. That sort of starts to reverse the trend of our enrollment decline that we saw for about 8 years, I think. So we're having progress in our enrollment and positive signs, but we're going to be kind of conservative in our enrollment growth estimates. Our 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's new state funding that we're receiving. In this view, this is the state funds coming to the Manhattan campus. There are dollars that we're going to go to the Salina campus. Those are the part of the Salina campus planning for that piece. We do have increased fringe rate costs, so that's increased for health insurance costs that we have as an employer for our health insurance. I think that was the big one this last year. The state, as we discussed, partially funds that, doesn't give us all funding of that cost. They've provided some partial funding for that health insurance increase. They funded, and that what they claim as a 2.5% pay plan. But like we mentioned, the way our general use budget works, state funds only cover about 50% of that budget. So when we talk about a 2.5% pay plan, if you spread that peanut butter across both tuition funded and state funded positions, really only means about 1.25% is what that money could really fund. So that's part of our tuition rate increases to help provide a little bit more than 1.25% to our faculty and staff this next year. We did get funding again from the state for the Student Success Playbook initiatives. That's $2 million. And then we did get a little bit more money for fee-based aid. So that will help us then continue to provide fee-based aid scholarships at the level that we had this last year. Some more money there. So all in, new state funding will be about $4.9 million, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I don't want anybody to run out here and say we're not grateful for money that we got from the state. It's just in relation to our expenditures, just never quite enough for what we would do to cover everything. The other R7 and R8, those are where we are cutting both college budgets and our administrative unit budgets in order to fund our enhancements that we've got built into this year's budget. So that generates a little over $3 million for dollars that we're going to reallocate to put those back into different priorities of the institution. That equates to about 1% for administrative areas. At colleges and units, it's because of our budget model, it varies, but it's anywhere between 1 and 1.25% the percentage cut their general use budget as well. So all told, net revenue that we're adjusting this year is $16 million out of the $311 million operating revenue budget for the institution. So that's new revenues. I'll stop there in case there's any questions. Yep. Jacob, right? Jacob. Okay. Caleb. Which is it?
For E15, is that just new dollars or is that?
Well, you're jumping way ahead. I haven't even done expenditures. That was new revenues.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Okay.
For R8, what is administrative units budget go to? Like, what is that used for?
So that would be like Thomas's budget, my budget, the provost office budget. Those are administrative units. So we're going to reduce those by about 1%, and then we're going to reallocate it back into sort of where we're funding. So the increased pay plan that the state didn't fund, our investments next year in information technology, both tools and people that will talk about that last meeting, and I'll talk about it too when we get into the expenditure side a little bit.
So really, it's anyone except a college,
Yeah.
except an academic unit.
Yeah.
So do you get what I mean? I guess what does your unit specifically use this money for? Is it like
Within the provost office?
yeah.
So these numbers are just going out, so we'll have to make those determinations. Where do we make that cut within our budget? So every leader is going to have to examine their budget and say, here's where we're going to cut that. And
Overarching,
colleges will have to do that as well.
overarchingly, every unit, the majority of their budget goes to fund positions. And so, in some regards, it might be you wouldn't fill a position next year because we've got to hold that position vacant so that we can afford that budget.
For the college budget cuts, will split even between colleges, or is there some colleges they hire cut numbers?
It'll be varied a little bit. The component of our budget model that we're reducing is not an across the board type component. It varies depending on how they performed in the model over time. And so it might be a little more than 1%. I don't know if it's less than 1%. Anyway, it'll be a little bit varied. The expenditures, okay. So in terms of the investment areas for next year, I mentioned the fringe rate costs, that's 600,000. We have components of our pay plan, aside from the 2% across the board that we're providing to all faculty and staff, because we recognize the need to have improve our faculty salaries and work to make them more competitive with our peer institutions. We have the next three areas are targeted faculty salary programs that we have in place. We've had them in place for a number of years, but that helps us improve upon our faculty salaries. So faculty promotions, that references any time a faculty member achieves a different level of tenure. So moving from assistant to associate or associate to full, that's 15% of their annual salary in there. So that's faculty promotion costs. We have professorial performance awards. That's 7,000 for those that are identified as professorial performance. And then we have targeted faculty salary enhancements. We're providing 150 awards out across the colleges. It's really kind of a merit-based award that can be provided at the college's discretion to particular faculty. And that's a $3,000 award that can be used to improve upon the salary of faculty. For small component of that can also go to unclassified professionals, just as at the dean's discretion, how they want to break that award up. So those are three components, three programs that we've had specific that help with faculty salaries. And then the big one that we have there is the pay plan. That's a 2% across the board. That's $3.7 million. And that would apply to everybody on payroll as of 12/1, December 1st of 2023. The 30,000 that's under market, our staff are on pay bands. And sometimes when a pay band is adjusted due to market, some of our employees that are on the very first step of that pay band then fall below their pay band. And so this 30,000 is meant to try to bring them back up within that pay band that they're assigned to. And then the other one that we are moving forward with is actually an adjustment to our university distinguished professors. So whenever you're identified as a distinguished professor, you're provided a $10,000 increase to your salary. Again, it's another opportunity for us to try to recognize outstanding faculty and their efforts in the institution.
And retain them.
And retain them. Yeah. We're going to adjust that. We've not adjusted that award in
20 plus years.
20 plus years, so we're going to adjust it up another $2,500 to make that $12,500. So this is the cost to then adjust those that are already in existence, adjust their salaries upward. So that's the salary and fringe changes that we have next year in the budgets. And then we get into our other operating expenses, so OOE. Now, this is unrelated to our cyber incident, but we did have a cyber insurance premium increase. Luckily, we were well down the path of negotiating the renewal with the system before Thomas's event took place. But we do have an increased cost.
The other tongue, so.
Yeah, we do.
Thank you for that clarification.
Poor Thomas. We also then have, and this is again, our big investment area that we're making this next year is in cybersecurity. And so that first piece on there are some university-wide contracts that we've entered into that are for monitoring both and security tools. So these are the tools that we've implemented post-event that insurance was able to provide coverage for about the first 30 days. And then for us to continue to make sure our environment is safe, continue that. They are very expensive, but also very necessary for us to continue to secure our environment. E10, that is again another, that's our big investment area this next year. It's going to be positions and support post-IT disruption. So these are going to be the individuals and the efforts that Thomas mentioned this at our last meeting, both positions within his area, but then also additional positions across the colleges to help basically advance our efforts in in how we manage and secure our environments, how we think about applications that we use at the institution, and positioning us also then for future enterprise resource, HR, finance, student system activities. This is going to be the big investment that we have this next year that helps move the university forward from a cybersecurity and information technology perspective. So as a university. We had some increased costs for our data warehouse. One item that you most likely probably saw was we moved to a new contract with MediaSite. So that's where a lot of online education content is hosted. It's actually a much better contract for us as an institution, provides more modern tools, especially when it gets down to accessibility for students. And so we have an increased cost for that. And then as a institution, we have property insurance, and we're anticipating, based on feedback that we've gotten from our insurance broker, that the whole system, but K-State, not just K-State, but the whole system should anticipate an 8% increase in our cost of our property insurance that we have. That's where inflation is real, and that's an easy one to sort of tie into increased costs. We have the $2 million for the student success initiatives that the state is continuing to assist us with, and then that one for K-State. So those are the major investment areas that we're making next year. So, Jacob, I'll take the question.
Is that new fee-based data or is that the solid fee-based data?
It's
Additional dollars
Oh,
for basic, that does not include the installment.
Those are key positions. Do you have an estimate for how many of those that you're,
it's 24.
Yeah, about 24 positions. Good. And I can tell you a little bit more about those. So there's 3 major components that we have. One is the expectation on K-State. Something that you may or may not have been aware of during this event, the state of Kansas actually cut us off on the system here. So they wouldn't trust our systems to communicate with them. Ethan talked about the cyber insurance premium. Anybody that had ever had the unfortunate event of having a car accident and what happens with your insurance, they come back and hold you to a very different standard. Ethan sort of mentioned nicely that we were able to sneak through an increase, not really sneak through. The renewal of our insurance happened at a time that it was sort of during that odd time of what happened. Obviously, there are our insurance carrier, they know more about the event than we do, which is how insurance companies work. But they will also come back next year when we renew that to basically make sure we meet that new threshold. Are we using MFA on everything? We have these secondary systems protected. How are we looking for vulnerabilities? So that's one big component of that. The second component is increasing that security posture. So that's looking at that tool set, responding to events, making sure that we're isolating machines and compromised. And then lastly, it's really the foundational enhancements. Those are the tools, if you recall last time I talked about, many of our enterprise systems will probably be more for your friends could train. I know Thomas and Eric, I shouldn't be saying that, but we all recognize these really old systems. They were introduced as campus private board, your friends were born, somebody was born. It's really bringing those systems up to a modern. So those are the 3. Okay.
Follow up to that question. When looking or we're trying to capture, I guess, number of positions, I guess that focus on IT support in relation to other institutions, what does that audit look like? We can state, so say that again. So what we're saying here, that the goal is to fund around like 24 positions, that's great and everything, but have we audited like the number of IT support positions of other institutions? Can you just,
Yeah, so I think most other institutions averages around 100, 150, 160. Even with this, I think this brings us to about 120, 90 plus 25. So yeah,
Or 120.
yeah,
so even with this, great question. Even with the investment comparison to our peers, we're still below our peers.
what exactly are we getting from media site now? Like so, yeah, we have an increase in price, but are we getting anything extra for that?
Yeah, so actually we're getting some pretty good advancements. So a couple of things happened during this event. We immediately started making phone calls. We have people, technologists that work really closely with the academic side of the house. And we recognize in order to restore that massive environment, and Debbie, remind me how many pieces of equipment we have? 6 million.
Yes.
I think there's 6 million different artifacts that exist in media site in our campus. And to think of what that would look like to restore, even if we could, we immediately started a contract with Media Site. They're a Canadian company. They did not have Monday off as a holiday. If you recall what happened there, they were immediately starting to provision those things so that we could quickly respond. We knew even if that data was safe in our ability to recover it, it would take us weeks and weeks and weeks to get it back online. So when we looked over that environment, what we determined, we didn't recognize at the time, is they actually re-encode all of that content so that it is adaptive bit rate. So adaptive bit rate means if you have a super fast connection at home, it will deliver you the highest quality content that we have. Netflix, YouTube already does that, but imagine the number reported something in a very high quality, but you're taking a remote class somewhere that you have a DSL connection or you're using a cell phone. What happens without adaptive bit rate? We send that high quality video and it goes buffering. So with the new service, it actually allows us to, it's adaptive, so it's slower connection. It provides you sort of it provides you a little bit more grainy video, but high quality audio. So it can sort of shift these things depending on the user. And we've actually received tremendous compliments on that from many faculty who teach class to individuals that are pretty cool. The second thing it allows us to do is code that with transcription. So with the service, we get X number of hours to transcribe this content. So if you think of some of your classmates or peers that may have visual or auditory issues, it allows them to see that or read that content a little bit more user-friendly.
And just out of curiosity, that's the increase, right?
Yeah.
So how much are we totally paying for media site?
I think previously we paid something like $80,000 a year.
Oh,
yeah. It wasn't much. Recognize for us though, it meant we had 30-some servers with a tremendous amount of storage that was tied up to it. And what we now do is we can leverage that storage for some of the actual compute that your researchers and faculty members are doing to move it into what we consider a computer sort of safe environment.
Does this also let us compete for federal research studies, which are very lucrative for the college? Because some of the federal research requirements require certain data requirements.
It does. I'm hesitant to say from a blanket statement, but it could.
So it's wonderful for the current consumer, but it also gives us capacity for the faculty, which we're trying to retain, to allow them to compete on an equal footing with other colleges for wonderful opportunities, I think.
Sorry, so E6, the under market, so you mentioned the pay bands. And this was just for me being naive, but what triggers that? Like, is someone going through the audit like, oh, your pay band changed?
Yep, so our human resources team goes out and looks at the market and looks at where those bands are in relation to the market. And the market adjusts. I think adjustments generally 2% a year. So they're continually trying to move those up so that we remain competitive as the market adjusts.
And Marcus, those tend to be our lowest paid employees across the campus.
Really, the rest of the materials in the packet, just additional information. I know questions last time about what does a 2.8% look like. This is the annual change in costs for in-state undergraduate students, an additional $278 to that annual cost, assuming 15 credit hours. And then we also wanted to show you then sort of everybody broken out, what that means on a per credit hour basis for all the different cohorts. So resident, non-resident, graduate, non-resident graduate, Manhattan campus and all that. Then we just provided a quick update to that handout that we had last time, which is just kind of shows you then just updates from last time that we talked about. So last time we were just showing what an example of 1% and now it's 0.8, where we updates those numbers. So really just wanted to provide those updated facts and figures for you. Happy to have, yeah, any more questions?
So we know KU is definitely going to be tuition rate increase. They are.
They're gonna be higher.
I just think we surpassed their old level, so I didn't know if we were going.
Right, no, they're coming in at, well, I shouldn't say, but they'll be higher. I think we're gonna be probably the lowest one of all institutions.
Lowest increase.
Lowest increase, yeah. A lot of the institutions are coming in with tuition and a student services fee increase. Obviously, you guys have decided not to do that, which is great. And then we're coming in at 2.8, which will be the lowest one, I believe, based on my last conversations. I think that's just, again, that reflection of, we know the investments that we're making. We know that we need to balance between, and how the institution pays for it, both internally with the budget reallocations, but then also looking at how the other revenues could play between the state and.
So, and I think this was entered last week, but to recap in reverse, so when this proposal goes through, is it like a strict yes or no? Or is it Kmart could come back and say, thanks for choosing the proposal, but we're capping it at 2.5 or?
They could. Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know, I've not heard that they would do that, but the time prior, maybe the one other time I remember where they said, yeah. They didn't come out and flat out say no, it was more conversations later on in the background, and then we all came back with just for proposal to meet sort of what their guidance was.
And just because Cable approves it, that's the end.
That's the milestone.
Unlike the legislator for the tax dollars coming in, right? Then, I'm sorry, the Cable sort of recommends the other funding level comes from the legislature. The legislature is the ending result. for
That's
that.
for the state funds, yes.
The Cable is the final say for
Which,
this tuition.
that's right.
Sorry, it wasn't very
Yeah.
articulate.
Direct to funding streams to.
Yeah, two final working bodies, yep.
I thought you were gonna go where, the student input, what latitude the students have today on their input to the budget, is that what you're also asking?
No, I was just. Just asking.
Yeah, question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, it seems like we that Kmart will approve this.
Boy, you asking me to tell you what the nine person body is gonna do. I think there's a high likelihood that they support it. I think, again, we're coming in, we're gonna be the lowest one, at least for my conversations with my counterparts. And we can demonstrate that we've taken a lot of factors into consideration in building our final budget. So my hope is, yes, that they would be very supportive of this. And it being a little bit lower than I think what they were anticipating.
Broad question. How did 2.8 get decided? I imagine it came on how much we thought we could absorb in costs of colleges and units. Was there any kind of?
It was about, how many meetings? We probably had about 4 or 5 different meetings, different options, and thoughts that we had put into it. So it was a balance. It truly has been a conversation about balance the entire time this semester. How do we balance enrollment? How do we balance tuition rate increases? How do we balance budget cuts? So the 2.8 allow us to reduce a little bit that budget cut to the units, which gives a little bit more relief, I think, ultimately to the operations of those areas. But that's kind of how we get it down. We also then reduced sort of our thoughts on the date. So it's been a broad conversation about balance across the different levers.
And a big piece of that balance across was how do we create the least amount of impact possible to students and still balance the budget at the end of the day.
While providing a superior product. You guys.
That's an exclamation point. Yes.
So what other questions do we have at this time? If any?
Caleb, what's our process to say yes, no, or what?
I would accept a motion. Yeah, that.
I can't, but.
Yeah, you're ex officio. Somebody else.
There can be discussion among the group if there is before a motion. If
Further question.
you don't just have to ask them questions, you can talk among yourselves before making a motion.
Yeah,
So that's an option as well. I think.
I'm pretty happy with the numbers, more than I expected to be. The other option being we decide what goes away or we cut more from the college's admin units. We have no information to make those decisions, so.
any other? Marcus?
No, I was just about to make a motion, but I'll wait.
No.
Cool. I move to accept this proposal for a 2.8% tuition increase. Is that formulated?
It sounds Robert's rules.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry, yeah.
Perfect.
So Marcus moved, RJ seconded. Is there any further conversation on the motion? Accept green light the increase?
I don't have a question about that, but last week it was brought up by someone in this room about how actually it's not here, but it was the question was brought up was how will students be notified of these changes? Has that been answered? Or what was said last week? I don't think it was fully answered.
So, boy, that's a really good question. I don't think we did get to talk about that too much internally. But we will obviously update all the information on our websites. And generally, I think what we do talk about once we give a budget update out articles, there's usually a K State Today that sort of talks about what that tuition rate increase looks like. And then I think there would be financial aid would be providing information out to students as well about the.
And Dr. Susie.
In case today.
Yeah. Yeah, so there will be a couple different avenues I think information to get out to the students.
Can there be a corporate communication until K-Board approves?
Yeah.
And what is the anticipated timeline for that?
They won't approve this until June, their June meeting. So we read the first read of our proposal is at the May meeting. They will consider it, talk about it, and then they would vote to approve it in June.
At the earliest.
But no, that's the latest that they could, yeah. But that's the case.
That answers your question, but how soon?
Yes, but then it makes me think of a follow-up. So this is a really good question. I've not enrolled in classes yet for the fall, so. But so for folks that have enrolled, right, they'll see, I mean, for folks that have enrolled for fall, they'll see a dollar amount. So then that dollar will just change.
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess a follow-up to my question then. So there will be no like update notification to them to know that it's changed, except for when they just go to, I mean,
I think we probably need to talk internally about how that traditionally works.
I'm just thinking now, yeah,
Yes.
I'm just thinking from the advisor perspective of how we're working with students on getting result. And if some are quoting, like trying to budget effectively down, then
I think we need to probably talk with Dr. Goose about it. Yeah.
I suppose that IT budget includes updates to cases to make it.
no.
We'll invite you back in 2 years.
I look where you're going. Why is my boss?
You don't like that time?
Lots of.
Are you gonna see it? I don't think they find a single or absolutely agreed with positions university in cases of takes. 100% student support for this.
Which is support for the tuition increase.
I think it would work.
Sorry.
All right, is there any further conversation?
Way to be presidential.
Hey, it's your job.
You're great at it.
Okay, if not, Jack, would you take it away with a roll call vote?
Yeah, it's
For clarification, a yes is supporting the increase, a no would be you do not support the motion to support the increase.
okay, Estelle,
Yes.
Bruckner,
No.
Zacco,
Yes.
Bellamy,
Yes.
Barazza. Yep. Solomon,
Oh, yes, sorry. I not hear someone.
Kid, yes.
Lippert,
Yes.
Come again?
You're muted.
Is there anything you chat?
I said yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Long,
I'm ex officio.
yes, you are. For anyone I missed. Okay, then we've got.
You're right on Zoom. Oh. Comments, please.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Brandon. My bad. Okay, we've got, 8 yeses to 1 no.
Okay, well, with that, it looks like the motion passed. So, that I believe concludes all that we have to do at the TFSC. So thank you everyone for, serving in this capacity throughout the year. And thank you administrators for, thank you for coming, presenting.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it a lot. So with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
And I think everything he's done, but watch the weather.
Yeah.
What time was my day? My heart was also. Yeah, I'm excited about it. First, it'll be like, something like August or something like that. I think this is something. Oh, okay, yeah.
I told you, you have a hard time getting it back.
Yeah.
Sticks and stones kinds of. It's not the appreciation.